am so excited to talk to both of you today because Kelsey, of course, you know, I love your book, Come On Calm. Not only is it just bright and colorful and a great children's book, but it's also, and I think you've talked about this before, it sort of helps kids learn in a fun way so they don't really know that they're learning. Even the characters in there, you have children of color, you've got a child in a wheelchair, you've got a child with a cast on his arm. So even those little details, the whole book is about inclusion. So just tell us about your book.
Yeah, so when I was at Imagination Stage, I was looking for materials. We had it's an interesting mix there because our teaching artists usually come from one of two worlds. They either come like as an artist first and a teacher second, or a teacher first and an artist second. Usually our teaching artists who had more of an education background had kind of an innate sense in order to be able to kind of judge the energy of a room and transform it. And they had tools to do that. And our artists first didn't necessarily have those skills because they hadn't been in a classroom with that many students for that many years. And that's something that kind of takes time to develop. So I was looking for accessible materials that talked about those sorts of things. And so how do we have a successful class? How do we lead a group of students in a cohesive way without, doing a lot of the negative punishment stuff? How do we incorporate that into what we're doing and make it a place that has the sensory stimulation that our kids need, the breaks that our kids need, so that we're not having to deal with a lot of behaviors and as an afterthought, we're doing it kind of proactively. And there was just nothing out there at the time. It just was frustrating to me because I was learning all of these amazing things, and I knew, from my different backgrounds, people who are in this field and in education have these skills. And I was like, why do you have to go through the ringer? Why can't we talk about these skills and teach them to new educators and new teaching artists? And so that's kind of where the idea of Come On Calm came. And I wrote it out as a poem to begin with, and actually read it with one of my classes on the day we were doing a sharing for their parents. So they kind of talked about how we were feeling and what that looked like in our bodies, and felt like in our bodies. And we coined the term nerve-sighted. So we were nervous and excited at the same time. And we talked about how you can have lots of big feelings at the same time. And so there's 9 strategies throughout, and each one gives you a way to kind of use your hands or your feet to do some squeezes or some breaths. Just give yourself a moment. And that energy after the poem, our energy was completely different. And I was like, whoa, this stuff works. It really does. And I don't, I'm very proud of the book, but these are strategies that I've learned, from other people along my way. I did, some research to find out some things that are kind of the most evidence-based, but putting them together in a creative way, whoa, I didn't even have the pictures at that point. And so that's when I was like, okay, I think I'm going to write a book. Let's do it. So I contacted one of my really good friends who's an amazing artist, and he 100% achieved my vision. The pictures are amazing.
And Bekah, I know you're a huge fan of Come On Calm. And so talk about your experience with the book and in your classroom.
I have brought it into my classroom mostly with my little ones, just as a way to talk about, like Kelsey said, talking about feelings. I usually bring it in a lesson where we're talking about how do we show different emotions, and then how do we work with those emotions to self-regulate, and looking at it through that imaginative lens. One of my favorite lessons I've actually done with the book is kind of a combined yoga lesson where we, we'll read the book, we look at the pictures, we kind of are doing the the different techniques like along with the kids on the pages. And then, as like a cool down, I have like certain pictures that I've pulled from the book that kind of emulate different like yoga poses, like when the kids are, being knights in the castle. I'm like, okay, it's kind of like warrior too. And so we like find those poses and we breathe through them. And it's a good way for me also to just kind of like reference back, like if there are big emotions happening and being like, okay, like let's, think about like we're going to breathe in, like we're smelling a flower, like let's work together to smell that flower, take a deep breath and let it out. Do we need to like squeeze something really hard, like we're squeezing that lemon? And it's just and gives a visual for the students. So I'm not just being like, oh, just take a deep breath. Because I think that especially for little ones, that's kind of a hard like concept to think of as, how is this supposed to like help me calm down? And it just kind of takes it outside of that. And like, let's just take a moment. We're going to smell a flower. Can you pick up your imaginary flower and give it a big, deep breath? And having those visuals, especially if I've already introduced the book in my class, to just kind of like think back to, and even for me to just like pull out and be like, let's be like our friend in this page. It just makes it a little more accessible, I feel like, to all children to kind of find those like coping strategies for those big emotions, and kind of gives them a space too to know that like it's okay to have these big emotions as well. I think a lot of times we see people who are just like, stop crying, and like stop crying isn't helpful. The emotion is still there, we're still feeling it, it's still valid, but like how do we work through that emotion so that we can like get to a place where it can be like, okay, I'm crying because of this, okay, like how can we work towards a solution in that way?
And it's so important. And I know even in the book, and maybe Kelsey, I've heard you speak before, that it covers, the range of emotions. So we have negative emotions that we need to learn about, but there's also, like you talk about, being excited, and there's all that energy and it's got to go somewhere. And so what do you do with that? And I know, for kids, even for adults, that's hard. And adults have the language and obviously maturity to be able to work through that better. In kids, it's like, what a challenge for a child to learn how to navigate emotions. And so this book is such a great tool, not only for teachers, but also that parents can use.
Yeah, exactly. That was my goal, is that, we're giving these strategies in this language, and it's something that does not end with the book. It's something that can become part of your home or classroom vocabulary. We're always going to have big moments. We're always going to have meltdowns. You can't completely eradicate that in a classroom or at home, but incorporating these things throughout your day and throughout your routine and making them part of your regular language is going to do a lot to regulate you and your students, for sure. For me, it keeps me also, as an educator, as a grown-up, from escalating and making the situation worse, because I'm doing it right along with them.
And also you talked about, that it helps that the parent is modeling the behavior, showing that it's okay and that everybody can do this and everybody has these challenges with their emotions.
There's still a lot of places, both in the classroom and at home, where the only times these conversations are happening are during big moments of emotion. The nice thing about the book is that it's meant to be an introduction at a time when you're just having a regular story time. And so the more you're able to go through this stuff and talk about it and model and practice when you're not feeling the big emotion, the better it's going to go when you have something to actually kind of calm down from. That word calm is so abstract. And like, what does calm look like? It's so hard, even for adults, to kind of articulate what they mean. The visuals, by the end, you get to kind of see what calm could look like in you.
Have you run into the same thing, Bekah?
Yeah, one of the things that like I bring up a lot is like asking the students for questions and feedback. What does calm mean like to you? Having like a physical example, like Kelsey mentioned with the book, is really helpful. and being able to like model, like as a teacher, I'm a really big proponent of like, if I'm having a big emotion when I'm in class, like I don't try to hide it. I acknowledge that emotion and I'm like, I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to give myself a big squeeze, or I'm going to like take a deep breath. Or if a student is having a big emotion, like I'll do whatever I'm asking them to do with them, and kind of showing that, yeah, like this is something that we all can do. And this is something that you can keep doing, and having that introduction through a children's book that is so bright and colorful and engaging, and being able to like start using those tools in like everyday life and making that part of like a regular routine is just so helpful. And I feel like it's important for like, I think at any age point, like I find that like, reading Come On Calm as an adult, I'm like, okay, like it, as I'm reading it out loud to my kids, I'm like, it gives me a moment too to pause and be like, where am I carrying tension in my body? Like, what am I feeling right now? How can I do this with my students to also, help me be in like a calmer, like clearer headspace?
Any kid learning to navigate emotions, this is just such a great tool.
And you mentioned about how the representation in our book, and that was something that was uber important to me, because I do want this book to feel like anybody could pick it up and they could see themselves doing these techniques. These are not techniques for one certain kind of person or one certain kind of body. Not every technique is going to work for every person, and not every technique is going to work for every situation. So I wanted to make sure that there was a variety so that any kind of learner, any kind of body could find something that works for them. One of my OT friends and I have done the book at our school, like in a group, and we've got lots of kiddos whose bodies don't work the way they want them to. They don't do the things that they're trying to get them to do at all times. But I've been really pleasantly surprised that they can participate in the activities just as much as everybody else's, because we no matter what your body looks like or how it works, these are important strategies.
One question I have for the both of you is, what do you see that kids struggle with the most?
I'd say for me, because I work primarily with like the littles, a thing that I think they struggle with the most is like identifying those feelings that they're having and subsequently like working through them. But the biggest thing is just like identifying it. Like it's really easy to just look at them and be like, they're having a tantrum or they're like running around the room and we just need them to stop. But it's so important to kind of work with them to kind of slow down and identify what it is they're feeling, so that we can come to that solution, and showing them that their feelings are valid, and whatever they're going through in that moment is valid. And one of the things I love about this book is that I can read it with all of my students, and we all can find some way to identify with it.
Another point that I always like to bring up with the book is that, especially when we're talking about like really young readers or maybe readers with disabilities, is that there's this expectation that reading a book or story time needs to be like sitting quiet, don't move, don't look away, sit up straight for X amount of minutes. And I think that is, it's not true. Like that's not how you build a love of learning and a love of reading. And so for me, it's giving, as parents and teachers, that can be hard, but it's giving yourself and your students grace, and realizing that when we're doing reading, when we're doing storytelling, the goal is to build a positive association with reading and learning. The goal is not to sit down and be quiet. And so if that means we read 2 pages and then we have to go do something else, that was positive. I'm a big fan of, and this is a lot of the work that Bekah does, is bringing in props and bringing in lots of sensory stuff to go with it. So even if you don't have anything fancy at home, but like you go through and you see there's a girl blowing bubbles, hey, we have bubbles at our house, do you want to go blow bubbles? Taking a break, going blowing some bubbles and coming back. The more ways you're able to engage with your body and kind of activate those different brain points, like the better connection students are going to have with the content. We've done classes where we read book with like infants, toddlers. No one expects 11-month-old to sit and listen to a story for 20 minutes. It's not going to happen. That's an unrealistic expectation, but that doesn't mean that they can't read a page and then play an instrument, or read a page and sing a song, read a page and then touch something. And all of those ways that they're engaging different senses and different parts of their body are only going to make their connection to the content stronger, because you're kind of pinging all those different parts of the brain. So one thing that I think is like super easy to do with Come On Calm is you've got the girl who's blowing bubbles. Well, we have bubbles at our house. Should we go take a bubble break? I feel like that only strengthens the idea of kind of using what you have, using things in the moment, and finding those things that are going to kind of help you reset. Not every break for every person is going to look the same. My amazing supervisor, Katie Cadell, would say that in a break, you're trying to get your brain back ready to learn. So you want to do something that gets your brain like a moment of pure joy, because when you're having pure joy, your brain is ready to learn. You're ready to take things in. A break shouldn't be a timeout. A break shouldn't be, okay, we'll sit in the corner for 5 minutes. A break should be doing something that's going to kind of reactivate and get your body ready to be in that space again. So bubbles is one of my favorite ways to do that. And that can be hard when you have someone that you just feel like is having a terrible day. And as a teacher, you want to just sit them in the corner because like they're just getting on your everlasting nerve, to say, I think we need to go blow some bubbles and have fun and be silly. Because I've seen it. If you take that student out in the hallway and you blow bubbles with them and you be silly and you show them that you care about their well-being and get them back into that brain space of joy and doing something that they love, they're going to come back a much happier person than if you shoved them in the corner and had kind of like a timeout situation. Again, it's just reinforcing all of those ideas of using what you have and engaging with your senses and giving yourself a moment to reset, because we all need it. And that's one of the taglines we say. Even pirates and explorers need to take a breath sometimes.
And what do you find, this is a question for both of you, is as far as reading to kids, like when should parents start? Like, I know obviously, like you said, nobody expects a 6-month-old or a 9-month-old to sit still and listen to a book, but there's still so many benefits to developing brains for, that come along with reading. So, what's your advice and your experience with how young should parents start reading to kids?
I mean, I'm a big proponent for like just reading from day one. Reading with your kids is going to look different based on how old they are, where they are in their development. Day one might just be like reading like a picture book that has like just sounds on it, and we're just like listening to sounds together. And as your child gets older, you can encourage them to make those sounds with you. There's always ways that you can incorporate, like Kelsey was saying, those like sensory things. A big challenge I had when teaching virtually was trying to incorporate that sensory interaction when I'm reading stories to, my students on the computer. And, what I started doing was thinking about like, what household things will everybody have that I can, ask my parents, like, hey, can you go grab like, 2 kitchen spoons and a blanket? And we're going to work together to use those 2 kitchen spoons to be like a horse's like hooves clopping. Or, we're in a marching band, and we're going to, we're making our drum out of like these 2 kitchen spoons and the floor. And how can those sounds change if we tap it on the floor versus our knees versus the table? And there's so many ways you can use a blanket. You can use it to play peekaboo throughout the story. You can use it as like an ocean wave. It can be your superhero cape. The main thing is just like knowing that it's okay to take breaks during your story when you're reading with your kids. And it's okay, like Kelsey said, if you read 2 pages and then you're done, that's okay, because we're still having those moments of getting that language, like hearing that language, hearing those sounds. I think the most important thing is make story time fun, bring those stories to life however you can, whether that's stopping and making a pose or like moving like a character, whether that's vocalizing different sounds, whether it's stopping to be like, hey, how many like birds do you see in this picture? There's always ways to just like bring that story to life. I'm sorry, I'm just like, now I'm like my brain is running, but
No, go for it.
a big thing that I also love to do in my classes is like having like a sensory bin. So if we're reading a story that takes place, it's about penguins, like, can I put like some ice cubes in like a bin and have, and some like little penguin like figurines or something, and have my students feel how cold that like ice cube is, and making that connection between the story and what they're feeling and seeing. There's so many like resources online to create different sensory bins for like different themes, and it's just a great way to just like take that extra step and continue to bring that story to life and make it real, especially like if you're living in the Midwest and you can't go to the beach. Can you get a little bit of sand and some seashells and you can still have that experience and make that connection?
I'm with Bekah day one. They can't see, they can't, but they know your voice, and they know that reading's going to become a comforting, positive time. And like, what magic is that a baby who can't even focus on the page, can't even focus on your face, but they're going to start to associate that time as being something that's really positive, like a great bonding time, and something that you can share like a closeness with. And that's how you develop like a love of reading. We talk about how, kind of like your reading levels at like 5 and 6 can honestly like do a lot of predicting for things later in life academically. But when we're talking about, infants, toddlers, preschool, their ability to play and interact with books is just as, if not more important than some of those academic skills, because they're going to get those academic skills at school. They're going to have plenty of time to work on that stuff with their teachers who really know how to do this stuff well. But one thing that you have kind of that special time before they start school is, that time with their family members, with their caregivers. And that's a way to make that time special and to really show them that reading is a good, positive thing. It's something that we love to do. And some of the things that I do and will recommend is you can sing books. You don't have to be a good singer to sing books and for kids to enjoy it. A lot of books, I will usually use the tune like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, or like Frere Jacques. Like a lot of books you can kind of sing that rhythm to, and they'll sort of work. Or you can just make up whatever comes into your head. But that's a way to make it a little bit more soothing, a little more engaging if you have a little one or someone who's not super engaged with it. You can skip parts. Like, you don't have to read every single word on every single page, especially if your little one doesn't have that print awareness yet. I understand when we're working on building print awareness and really pointing out each word individually, that's another thing. But I'm talking about when you're reading with infants and toddlers. No, skip the huge paragraphs. That's boring. And summarize it in your own words. How would you say this? Come up with things that you think the characters are saying. Like Bekah said, like, sound effects are magic. They are super fun and engaging, but they're also really important for language development, especially for like the itty bitties, like infants. So even if you just look at the pictures and you see a car and you go vroom, 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 like, that is building that engagement. That's building that language. That's making those connections. And then I think it's also about kind of knowing the kinds of books to pick. There are some things that we pick because we as adults love them and are touched in our hearts. And that's great. And I have many in my collection that are like that. But when I'm working with really itty bitty readers, when I'm working with readers who are not going to sit and be quiet for 20 minutes, I'm looking for a certain kind of book, and that's going to engage them as far as their attention, and also that's going to engage them in developing that emergent language skills. So I'm looking for books that are repetitive, that have maybe like one phrase or a couple of words that's repeated over and over again, so they can start to anticipate what's going to happen next, what those words are going to be. And as they become more familiar, you can kind of like pass that on to them. So, maybe you're reading the whole thing at first, then as they get more familiar, you can read it together and suggest like, oh, say it with me. And then maybe later it's their part only. And like, that's the time that they get to shine. When I'm reading Come On Come to students, it's usually to school age when I'm doing a group. So I'll say, oh, come on, calm. Those both start with C's. So when we see come on, calm, even if you don't read, even if you only have the idea of maybe what a C is, when we see this phrase, like, that's your time, like, we're going to do it together. Okay. So they are on alert looking for those word shapes, even if they can't read, and they know that that's their time, that we're going to do it together. So finding ways to do that. There are a lot of awesome books now that have like the built-in engagement in there. So like Bekah said, we are masters at finding like random stuff and turning it into other stuff. I understand that does not come naturally to some people, and it is okay that you don't sit on the floor playing with spoons for fun, like we do. But there are books that will tell you like exactly what to do. There are a lot of books that have like call and response things in it, or those like touch the page and then this happens, do this to the page and this happens. Any of those books are going to help build that engagement. And then the other thing I would suggest is finding books that are about topics that your kiddos enjoy. So you want to introduce them to a variety of reading materials, including like cereal boxes and stop signs. But if there are things that they're really into, then like dig in hard. If they like trucks and you see a truck book on the shelf and at the library, like see like how many trucks books can we find, and check them all out and read them and talk about which ones you like and which ones you don't like. Get your toy trucks out and have them act out the book, or just kind of, something I like to do when I'm with a big group is I'll have manipulatives and I'll kind of just like pass them out as we're going. And sometimes just like having something to hold and like kind of fiddle with, like keeps them in the seats longer and keeps them engaged longer. So I'll do that with like books about cars, and everybody like gets a car every couple pages, because then they're like also on their seats about like, oh, am I going to get the next car? Like, who's going to get the next car? Or we'll do like fruits and vegetables. There are those fun like cutting sets with the Velcro. And like, I've never met a kid who is not absolutely obsessed with the cutting fruit toy set. And so like, I'll do that, and I'll like find like, oh, I see an apple in this grocery cart. It doesn't even have to be like completely related to what's going on in the story. We'll worry about that stuff later. We're just talking about positive experiences right now. So we go find an apple in our bin and we cut it, and then we go to the next page. So finding those ways to connect and engage, and again, build those positive experiences and get them to feel when a book comes out like, oh my gosh, I love reading, I love books, because that's only going to strengthen as they go on and it becomes a little bit more boring and academic.
I do have friends who have little kids that don't like to read, and it could be it's hard for them, or it could be it just doesn't interest them, but they are out there. Like, not every kid just automatically loves to read. So I love how you're talking about ways to engage with them and make it fun. And, no, you don't have to sit there and read every word from start to finish, sitting still. Like you said, you've given a lot of ways to make reading fun and interesting, and read 2 pages and then go blow bubbles, or read 2 pages and then go do something fun. So many creative ideas. for people who, parents and educators, where can they go to get a copy?
On our website, it's comeoncalmbook.com. We still have a limited quantity of those left for purchase, so you can get a signed copy sent to you from us. And they are soon, but not yet, going to be available kind of in general online wherever books are sold. So Amazon, Barnes and Noble online. We love to support independent authors. So it's like IndieBound is a great way to look up kind of how to purchase books, and Bookshelf is another one of those that you can buy it online, but the money will go to your local bookshop. I think it'll be on Target online, Books A Million online, Barnes and Noble online. And then we'd love your help in helping us get on the shelves in your local bookstores and libraries. So we have a fact sheet, and I don't believe it's on our website just yet, since it's not quite up on those catalogs yet, but we will have a one sheet that you can print out or email to your library or your local store asking if they'll pick up a couple of copies to have for sale.
Awesome. And then there's also, of course, on makemomentos.com, they can get the digital version. So a parent or a grandparent can narrate the story, and then that child will be able to view that on their tablet or smartphone and play it as often as they want, and really practice these skills that you're teaching in the book. So again, I am so excited to talk with both of you today. I think the work you're doing is amazing, teaching these little ones how to navigate big emotions that's not easy to do. And so I just thank you for your time this morning, and maybe we can chat again another time. And because there's so many ideas that you have, I feel like there's so many more that we haven't even touched on, and maybe we'll get to that at a later date.